Hey there, everyone. This is Leah from IMAX Victoria, and today we have an exclusive interview with prominent Canadian filmmaker Stephen Lowe. Stephen is behind the 3 films we have joining our schedule for the Stephen Lowdown Mini Film Festival. The films that we'll be playing are Rocky Mountain Express, a Victoria fan favorite, Beavers, the Director's Cut, and The Trolley. Stephen is the director and filmmaker behind all 3, and he is known for an extensive body of work in giant screen films. He has over 17 titles to his name. So let's head over and check in with Stephen to find out more about these 3 fantastic films. All right. Hello, Stephen, and welcome from IMAX Victoria, and hello from Victoria residents and fans of IMAX Victoria. We are so glad to have you with us today.
Thank you. Fun to be here.
Awesome. So we are just jazzed about the showcase of your films that we have coming up. We'll have Rocky Mountain Express, Beavers, the Director's Cut, and The Trolley. All 3 films, a part of your diverse collection of films through the years. How did you get started in filmmaking?
I was in the late 70s. I had a chance to work with Roman Kreuter, who was one of the founders of IMAX. And we worked together on a film about the Canada Challenger at the National Film Board. And the film was very successful. And so Roman had a new project with the Japanese, with this, I think it was Suntory Liquor Company. They were doing a World's Fair film in 84, the World's Fair in 85.
Okay.
So around 82 we started. And it was a film about birds, and I had to learn a lot about birds. We ended up training Canada geese to fly with a speedboat so that we could get really close. And that's kind of the history of IMAX filmmaking, is that because the format is so difficult to use, you really have to enlist the wildlife or for people to really contribute to
Right.
the filmmaking. It's you can't stand on the sidelines and do it. You really have to get a lot of cooperation.
And what about IMAX and the giant screen format sort of really called to you? Why did you get into that format?
Well, it was an opportunity, and it was stunning. I mean, to sit in those days, to sit in front of a screen the size of a 6, 7-story building, it was just magnificent. And Hollywood format was 10% of that, 10
Right.
times smaller. So I'd seen all the effort that went into making Hollywood films and the money and so on. But they were really working with Mickey Mouse equipment and
Right.
cameras compared to IMAX.
And now, so your films, your list of IMAX films and giant screen format films is very impressive and have some of our sort of top films of all time on them, including sort of in that number 1 spot, Rocky Mountain Express, which is a Victoria fan favorite. We love Rocky Mountain Express. So what took you to that topic of Rocky Mountain Express and that sort of human adventure?
Well, I had always been interested in trains and railroads, and I worked at the Expo Rail, the Canadian Railway Museum in Montreal in the 60s. And then I worked on the Canadian Pacific out of Thunder Bay, Ontario, when I went to university up there. So I was a brakeman, a trainman, carman, switchman, and put myself through school with that. And I loved the railroad. I thought it was kind of heroic work and
Yeah.
real blue collar, quite dangerous work in those days. But I thought there was a romance to it, and especially when the CPR started to restore this steam engine, which we never thought was going to happen again. We thought
Right.
that no, because that happened in the 60s, but they were engines that the CN and CP had that were operational. And this engine was a wreck, and they restored it from scratch. And it was the idea they were going to run this across the Rocky Mountains. I just had to do it. I mean, it was such an opportunity. And we just did it. We weren't funded to do it. We just did it on our own.
Right.
Interestingly, the American military loves that film, and we couldn't quite figure that out. Like the Navy museums and so on, and it has to do with young people sacrificing their taking risks and sacrificing themselves for the country, basically,
Right.
which is what military kids do. They sign up
Totally.
to contribute to society, and that's what they did when they built the CPR. There were all these young guys came from all over the world, North America, Eastern
Yeah.
Canada, and they built the country. And they,
Yeah.
it was very risky stuff. They were
Yeah.
using dynamite all over the place, and it was very tough. And of course the Chinese were a huge part of that, and terrible, risky work. But they
Yeah.
built a country, and I thought that was spectacular. That's one of the few Canadian topics ever made in IMAX, which it's always bugged me that we invented IMAX in Toronto and Montreal, and we created this worldwide medium with 100 and so theaters, 150, 200 theaters, but we never put in place the mechanisms to fund the films. And it's kind of sad that Canadians as a group didn't get together and say, we got to make Canadian films. But Rocky's one of the very few on a Canadian topic. There have been very good films made, like the space shuttle stuff by Canadian filmmakers, like Graham Ferguson and Tony Myers and so on. But those aren't Canadian topics per se.
Right. One of the sort of cool things about this showcase that we get to do with your films is that the films selected all have a Canadian aspect to them. So Rocky Mountain Express, obviously with the Canadian Pacific Railway. We have the Trolley that features as one of the storylines, the Toronto Transit Commission's streetcar. And we have Beavers, the director's cut, which, Beavers are inherently Canadian.
Right.
So it's kind of an interesting piece for us to be able to bring these Canadian storylines together. Speaking about the Trolley a little bit, that's sort of one of your newest projects. And, we have Rocky Mountain Express, which is about the steam engine. And then we have the Trolley, which is, sort of related. But do you think that they're a common theme in the two films, or what should audiences expect from the Trolley?
Well, I think the point of both films is different. To me, I always felt that Toronto was a bit of a hero in that it saved its electric public transit, where the rest of the world pretty much threw it away in the 60s. Everyone decided that freeways and cars were the solution. There are other exceptions. There are East Europe. Australians kept some of their streetcars, but in general, in North America, it was really Toronto that kept a big system going. And I wanted to make a point that in this, the problems that we're looking at going forward with CO2, it largely is our own kind of ignorance, and that technically we had solutions to a lot of these problems, even in the 1880s and 90s, where electric public transit was extraordinarily energy efficient. And if you could use hydro, they often didn't. They use coal, but if you can find a source of a zero emission or zero fossil emission, then they're absolutely spectacular.
Right.
Highways are terrible. A truck uses at least 10 times more energy than a train does. Well, you got to do the math.
Right.
And especially, we live, a lot of the energy, liquid fuels we use are in urban environments where cars are stuck in gridlock.
Right.
Solution is electric rail. It's a very simple solution, and it's a huge benefit. Batteries are not a solution with rubber tires. They are energy inefficient. So you're going to be using a huge amount of energy to charge those batteries.
Right.
The best thing is shared transportation on iron, because it's so low in friction.
Right.
that it's very energy efficient. So anyway, that I wanted to make a point, but it's not a point that people really want to hear about. You know, people in IMAX, I mean, we're they go and look at the animals and the blue planet and the lovely polar bears and teddy bears and, you know, panda bears, and but they don't really want to hear what we have to do to save them.
Right.
So at what point do you say, well, okay, we don't want to kill the bears or the natural world. We don't want to wreck the planet. So what are we going to do?
Right.
So, you know, put all those things aside. What do we do? And the trolley is one of the things you could do.
So I wanted to talk about the last film as that's a part of the showcase before we wrap up, which is Beavers Director's Cut. Before we get into talking about the film itself, where did Beavers fall in your career, Stephen, in terms of the timeline? Had you done a lot of giant screen projects before you got involved with Beavers?
No, I had done, I think, just one.
Okay.
I think I did Skyward. So it was kind of my third or fourth film, and it was a film that IMAX didn't want to do because it was going to be a film about nuclear power for a visitor center. They had built a theater
Right.
in Hamaoka, Japan, and so Roman came back from Japan. He said, you know, I've recommended you to do this film, mainly because we don't want to do a nuclear power film. So I went to Japan and sat in front of the board of this giant power company. They said the biggest in the world, and tried to explain to them that I didn't want to do a nuclear power film because they already had a nuclear reactor visitor center, right? So people are already going to be going into this reactor, and I thought, well, you need something completely different for the theater,
Right.
and so I recommend. So they said, well, what? And I said, well, it's obvious. You need a film about beavers,
Of course.
and they weren't too keen on that at first, and so I went home and I didn't think I'd hear from them again, but a few months later, the agent called and said they changed their minds. They want to do a film on beavers. So I had to. I never even met a beaver, and
Then you
so
actually had to do it.
I had to do it. Yeah.
And where is it actually filmed, Stephen?
It's filmed mostly in Alberta,
Okay.
in Kananaskis and Banff,
And Banff.
in Banff Park on the Bow River, which is beautiful clear water.
Yeah.
And then the interiors were done, like the inside of the house and stuff, in Toronto and Pickering.
Okay.
Um,
And for folks, so we have played Beavers before at our theater, but we played it in film. So when we still had our film projector, and quite some time ago. And the film that we're going to be playing now is the director's cut. So for the folks who have seen the original version, what can they expect to be different in the director's cut?
well, when we filmed Beavers, we didn't do a lot of aerials because in those days the aerials were difficult to do in IMAX. There was a lot of helicopters had a lot of vibration and stuff, and I was never happy with it. We tried and did experiments and stuff, but the kind of aerials I wanted to do had required a really good system, and that came along later. So all this is to say that we did a whole series of aerials of the area around where the Beaver film was made. While we were shooting Rocky Mountain Express, we had built this library to show the broader environment around the Beaver house and the kind of mountains and the topography and so on. And so we built up this library and expanded the film with this sort of bigger story of the environment. And took a long time. We probably, you know, I'm happy we did it this way because the quality of the aerials is really stunning.
Right.
And the film is transferred at 8K. So the projector that you have in Victoria is really splendid. The new laser projectors are great. because the transfers were done off of 1570 and they were very high resolution. So anyway, so better late than never. But it changes the film. It puts the beavers in a much broader context, a much more beautiful kind of broad context. And so I think there's 4 sections, new sections in that set up the seasons of the spring, the fall, and the winter.
Awesome. Well, we all look forward to it greatly. And we just want to say thank you once again for your time today to give us some of the behind the scenes and exclusive insights on these 3 films. In general, for your beautiful body of work and for bringing more Canadian content to our screen. And just thank you for the opportunity to showcase your films.
Thank you. Thanks, Leah.
All right, well, you've heard it straight from Stephen Lowe himself. These are not films to miss out on. So grab your tickets while you can in advance online at IMAXVictoria.com to get your tickets to The Trolley, Rocky Mountain Express, and Beavers, The Director's Cut. We'll see you soon.